What's up, future shred lords? Welcome back. Death to the Fingers. I got another great question on Twitter. This time they're like, listen, can we take a break from the shred and the arpeggios, and can you explain, some of the secrets of the 12-bar blues? I've been practicing the blues scale and everything like that, and the minor pentatonic sequences. And my solos don't sound half as cool as the greats like Clapton and, Hendrix and Jimmy Page and countless other guitar players in there. What am I doing wrong? And you're not doing anything wrong. You're just not taking it to the next logical conclusion. We're going to talk about it right now. And the big takeaway here is superimposition and its power. Basically, the idea that you can layer 4 different scales over top of just one backing track. I know, mind-blowing. So, no more yip-yapping. Let's get into this lesson. All right, Shred Sexies, along with the question, they sent along a backing track. In this case, I believe it's Jimi Hendrix's Red House. And in this case, the key is B flat, right? So they're doing a 1-4-5 in B flat, meaning the B flat, that's the 6th fret on the low E string. Then they're jumping up to the 6th fret on the A string. For the E flat, that's the 4 chord, jumping up one more time, a whole step, F. Okay, that's going to be the 8th fret, and then back down to the B flat, which is the 6th fret on the low E string. That's essentially your entire progression, right? And then you go, of course, 5 to 4. And then you can do a turnaround. There's a million to do there. I'll leave it up to you to sort of figure that part out on your own. That's a whole nother lesson. But now we have the essential structure of basically the entire song, and that's 100 songs or a million. So this is the first step to sort of really maximizing your sort of your superimposition, if you will, because now you have at least a roadmap to follow. Right, so in this case, when I'm on this B flat, it makes sense to essentially play this B flat minor pentatonic. Right, and then I was like sitting there, I was like, what other one do I want to play? I want to superimpose another scale over top of it. I want to use the pentatonic for that, of course, so I'm going to use, why not use B flat major? That major-minor relationship is incredibly popular and a must as far as, music is concerned. So be doing that a lot. Instead of playing, the minor pentatonic all the time, switch it up for the major superimposed over the same spot, right? So it's a great sound again. Okay, so that's a big one. And then I was like, we might as well do it again. So I was like, why not use Dorian? Because essentially the Aeolian position, which is what I'm doing here, and Dorian are interchangeable. Now, of course, I'm kind of skipping over a lot of the big theory stuff because I think you'll just get confused. Instead, be like, those two scales are interchangeable, but of course, you got to wait for the appropriate chord to play it, as you can hear me do. Right, I move from the major to the minor, and then I do the Dorian position because it's on the F here, okay? And that is essentially what I'm doing here, right? There's the minor pentatonic, F minor, jumping up again. That gives me this G flat, or I should say A flat major, and jumping up one more time, it's going to give me this B flat Dorian position, right? Which is... And just to go all out, I'm basically also layering E flat major over top of it. And in this case, I'm using the Lydian mode. So I'm now jumping down here. If I was doing this, right, then jump down another one. Essentially, when I'm at E flat, I'm going to move down a minor third. Which, of course, gives you this option here, which is going to be C major, or the C minor pentatonic. Moving down again, that gives me, of course, Mixolydian, and one more time. Gives me Lydian there, right? Starting here on the 4th fret. So you can just play 3 notes per string if you want. And the reason why is that's an incredibly important, sort of borrowed notes, if you will, from that scale with respect to this B flat minor pentatonic, right? Now, you might have heard that a few times, and that note essentially comes from the Lydian mode. In this instance, at least that's how you can see it, and then you can just apply that as a rule now every time you do the pentatonic scale, and you'll be like, all those notes are going to be useful in the entire sequence. So now you can be like, right, you can be another one there, right? And keep going that whole process and just sort of mesh these two together and be like, these are where all the extra notes are, usually a half step down. Of course, you can factor in the melodic minor, you can factor in the harmonic minor too, but that's, you know, getting a little bit more advanced. So I think you're starting to see the power here. So I did B flat minor pentatonic, I did G minor pentatonic, I did F minor pentatonic, and of course at the very end here I'm doing C minor pentatonic. I know. So you can see I took 4 of them and I just jammed them together. So what I'm going to do here is demonstrate just the 3 pentatonic ones over the backing track again, so you can hear each one of these flavors working over top and how each one, even though I'm playing the same scale shape, this one, that one, and that one, they all work together over this particular backing track. And that right there basically lays bare the entirety of superimposition, because all you're doing now is instead of starting way down here, you're going to move up to the major position, then move up one more time. You're like, that's Dorian. Done. If you're starting here, obviously that's just the minor pentatonic position. Finished. If you're starting in G minor, you got a major superimposed over it. So that's where I came up with those 3 scales. See, there's G minor, moving up to this B flat major. Okay, and then I have, of course, B flat minor pentatonic. And the last one is with this F minor here. And of course, one more. Okay, so those ones there, obviously, and Dorian again and Aeolian are basically interchangeable as a sound. You just got to know when and where to use it, but you can get away with it a lot of the time. And the last one, which is me just being sneaky here, is factoring in the C minor pentatonic here. Right, that's 6. That puts me down to 5 here. And of course down here gives me Lydian. And once I do that, I've got basically all my bases covered. So let's just listen to the backing track one more time and me just playing the simple pentatonics, and that will give you a pretty good overview about how you can start to do this. Starting off, obviously, by just playing them and moving between them, and then, of course, starting to superimpose the shapes that overlap each other into the one position and just figuring out for yourself using ear training and with experience, of course, just through practice to actually get these sounds to work to your advantage. Let's do it. Alrighty then, so that was probably moderately edifying, of course, and I didn't actually factor in the C minor there because it'll sound pretty weird comparably, which is why I use the Lydian mode rather than the actual pentatonic, because when I start to get further away from the key center, in this case, the B minor pentatonic, if I don't fill in some of the extra notes there, then of course I run into some problems, which is why it sounds great when you combine it with other ones, but not so great when you just throw them out there on their own. Now, listen, the more experience you get, you can do some pretty crazy stuff with using the more outside ones. And of course, there's a rule there. Essentially, if I'm playing in this this sort of native position with respect to the B minor, I can just move up a whole step, and that's going to be another pentatonic scale that I can use. And of course, you're starting to see if I move down a minor third and a whole step kind of deal, that's going to work too. So how you organize your thoughts with respect to how to play these things is your business kind of deal. But once you get that far, then it's a question of essentially playing the right pentatonic scale over top of the right chord. Right? So in this case, when I'm doing the first one, I'm doing this major over this first one. Now, of course, these are basically fifth chords. They don't actually have the sort of flavor of major or minor, which is why you can kind of get away with playing minor and major at the same time. Does that make sense? I know it's a little weird, but that's the thing. The less complex the chord, the more you can kind of do with the scales, and the more you get complex with the chord, the quicker it sort of narrows down the choices. So if I'm playing a major minor chord, I'm basically relegated to the melodic minor stuff. But if I'm just doing a standard power chord here, you know, well, then all of a sudden I have a huge amount of choices to play, and you just saw me do them, right? So that's that's true, obviously, for all of them. Whenever I'm doing just 5 chords all over the place, that's one of the secrets of the 80s metals guys. The 80s metals, whatever, going with it. So the next thing is of course, is again ordering it. So when I played it, I went and started with the major, right? And the reason I did that is because it creates a bit of tension. It's nice, but it's not like over the top. So it's just enough to be like, nice, okay, that sounds cool. And that sets up the idea of me moving directly to the minor pentatonic. So again, when I'm ascending, again, that comes from the 3 notes per string system. We've talked about this many times. Okay, so I'm superimposing another scale there to get this half step bend in there, right? Again, slowly. Now I'm borrowing that note, of course, from the Ionian position. And then what that does is now lets me set up to the right, which is, of course, the B minor pentatonic. That's the tried and true. Of course, you can sneak more notes in there. That's, yes, the sharp 5 from the harmonic minor system, or that's from the Lydian system. I know, and that's how you got to think about these things. It's like I'm borrowing a note from one of these other adjacent scale systems, and then that gives me the tools, if you will. Of course, with this one here, B minor, you could also see that as the melodic minor. But you got to be careful there. Now, it would probably make more sense to see that with respect to the harmonic minor system, because that's going to sound a lot better than the melodic minor. Again, once you get into the melodic minor, you kind of need a chord that's going to complement it, and a straight up power chord and whatnot, or a blues sequence like the one we were looking at, is not going to get it done. So that comes with experience, essentially knowing when and where to use that, and using your ear to be like, okay, that chord, it's pretty complex. It's what we call dense, or what I call dense at least. So there's like a lot of notes that kind of clash with it, you know, sort of like these minor seconds and major seconds, that kind of a vibe. Once you get a sound like that layered over top, and of course you're getting that with the Hendrix stuff, right? Or you got the even more, that's probably more realistic, you know. So, or those kinds of chords are going to give you lots of, you know, room to play with the melodic minor and stuff like that. But of course, we're not hearing any of those chords here. So if you're doing sort of Purple Haze, where he's doing a ton of chords like that, that's a perfect time. But when you get into something like The Wind Cries Mary and whatnot, of course, you got to dial it back and just use it in specific instances. It'll work great over the dominant 7, because it's got a diminished triad in there with respect to just the chord itself, right? In this case, there's the diminished triad, which means melodic minor territory. But when you're doing a straight up chord, like major or minor, I mean, the minor one, sure, but you got to be a little bit more judicious with it. But then in major, you got to be very careful. If it's done improperly, it's just going to kill your solo. Right? So again, I'm starting off with the major here. Into the minor. Then I'm, of course, jumping into Dorian. Of course, that's major, right? Or you could see that as also, you could see it as Phrygian, but that's another day. And of course, see that? I'm again using superposition. I'm jumping back to the B minor here. Except now I'm ascending with Dorian. Again, this idea of tension and release, which is what the blues greats have mastered. It creates the interest to be like, oh yeah, that's kind of out there, that's neat. And then all of a sudden they bring it back down to earth by coming back into the key, and that's the magic right there. And last but not least, of course, is I want to borrow this note, and all I do is just a really shreddy sequence with respect to the Lydian mode, right? I'm ascending. Ascend again, now I'm in Mixolydian. That's Aeolian. That's Locrian. And then, of course, into Dorian there. Again, all 3 notes per string. Right, and I move up to the next one. That's going to be Mixolydian. Of course, I'm moving up one more time. Right, I started down here, up another whole step. I'm going to do Aeolian. That's where I'm getting this C minor pentatonic from. And so on and so forth. And I'm just basically now taking a small chunk from each one. In this case, I'm using this little chunk from the actual Lydian position. Then I'm jumping up here to keep it going in Mixolydian. And then, of course, chromaticism there. Until I end it, right? So that's basically the long and short. I want to get into a massive lesson here because honestly, you're just going to get more confused if I keep talking about stuff. But step number 1, just find the native, what I call the native key, meaning if you were to play just using B minor pentatonic and all of course, the associated inversions of it with the major, Dorian, Phrygian, meaning I'm ascending with this scale and then to the major, of course. That's the next inversion. I'm moving up again, Dorian. Phrygian, of course. Into Mixolydian kind of situation. It'll always work out. There'll be a moment there where it sounds a little strange, especially over the F there, but it'll pretty much work out and nobody's really going to complain because it's deemed acceptable because so many people have done it. But that's the magic where you're basically trying to now find the appropriate scale to make it sound better and then use a couple simple music principles like tension and release, as I'm doing here with this major, the minor. And that way you can start to really maximize the mileage with respect to these scales, right? So of course, just ascending. That leads me right in. There's Lydian, right? So on and so forth, right? And of course, I think the big one is again, when you're starting to practice, just essentially start with this B minor in this particular song, right? And the backing track is down, of course, in the description box below. And of course, jump into the G minor, and then of course, jump into the F minor. And if you're brave, jump into the C minor. And start working with just those core scales, and then of course, try to find ways to connect them. And so you're like, okay, well, if I'm starting here with this one, and I've got a whole step up, the same one, if I go down this step, it's the Mixolydian shape now, so I can ascend Mixolydian, and then descend using the B minor. Now, listen, you got to do that over the appropriate chord. In this case, most likely the F chord, right? When we're playing up here. So when you're getting to this chord, you want to sort of, and then done. So that's that will be, you know, very useful in terms of changing up your solos and giving you more sort of room to play around with this basic scale system. And then of course, over time, you'll become a lot more sophisticated. One thing I do want to point out is essentially chromaticism. You see me doing it a lot here, you know, in this. And then there's that flattened third. That's from Mixolydian. Right, so that's all in there, right? Avoid going too much, right? Instead, add an extra note. So I've got these three and these three. There's a nice one, sharp 5. Again, that sort of takes the tension off of that flattened third. And I'm doing the same shape across all 3 strings. You know, I'm kind of whipping through it here and not really paying attention too much to the playing, but you get the idea. Is that's the most important part, is to start experimenting a little bit and be like, if I'm... That's using the Mixolydian position and then layering that on there. Or maybe you're going to be like... More chromaticism there. You're like... And so on and so forth. You can just keep going and get crazier and crazier by just filling in all of the notes. So experiment away, and that's really the big takeaway here is not only just superimposition, but starting to fill in some of these notes with respect to the other systems. If you're like, okay, well, if that's true like that, what happens when I do it here at the G minor? And you'll be like, that's another note that sounds great or doesn't sound great at all. Maybe you'll do it again up here at the F minor, right? And be like, that sounds killer too. So 2 of them are going to work great. One of them's probably going to be pretty out there. But that's just it, is this trial and error process is absolutely essential to becoming a much better musician. So we'll leave it there. Essentially, fire up the backing track. Start with B flat minor pentatonic, the 6th fret on the low E string. Then jump down here to the 3rd fret, G minor. That's the major minor flip, that relationship. Then of course moving down here to the F minor. And if you're really brave, then jump up a whole step and do the C minor. Done. And then of course, as you get better, you can just start filling in some of those notes and adding more chromaticism and blah, 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 and more advanced functions, of course, like sweeps and tapping and all kinds of good stuff. Or just more exotic scale systems. I would start with the harmonic minor in this case. You'll be like, yeah, actually, you know, in this case, it kind of sounds pretty cool. And maybe just use the one note, the sharp 5. Target that note specifically And you'll be like, okay, I'm starting to understand it. In which case you'd be like, okay, I'm starting here. That's your sharp 5 right there, right? Then you're going to jump up. There's another one. Right? And of course, you've got the one down below too. Or sorry, this one. And that could be a great tool to sort of like, again, give yourself a little bit more differentiation. In this case, you're just using a different minor scale. So again, it's not superimposition. You're just swapping the minor pentatonic for the harmonic minor scale. Done. And of course, you can just use just that one particular note. So instead of ascending, you're like, there, it's right there. Oops, sorry. And all of a sudden you're like, okay, I've kind of heard that before if I'd have played it right, but good enough for today, right? So superimposition, that's the ticket right there. And then see how these scales apply and overlap over top of each other, then try to get them all in one position. So you're playing the major to the minor to the Dorian, and then end in the key, right? Maybe get more in sync. Okay, that's me combining 3 notes per string and the pentatonic together in this case. Another great way of sort of like, again, getting maximum mileage. Of course, don't be afraid to slip in that Mixolydian position, and Lydian, of course, is going to work great too, but Mixolydian is also going to sound really great over top of it. Of course, any of them are. Once you get there, that's, of course, based around this E major situation, E flat major, I should say. So again, this scale, this one, and this one. Of course, that's the entire shot. All 3 of the last ones there, all start here at the 6th fret. And of course, just for moving down a whole step, I can get Lydian as well. If I don't take it the extra note there, but of course, it's going to sound great. And that gets you into this another great sound, right, with the C minor pentatonic. So I hope that helps. Good luck on your practicing, and jump on that backing track and try it out and see how you do, and watch. In 6 months, you'll be like, you know what, I'm a far better musician right now than I was 6 months ago because I just employed this very simple idea. And you can just start with the basic scale systems and branch out from there. See you in the next one.